Yeah, it's alright, innit?
Kia ora and hello, welcome to my video about a one-day scenery build, in which I make a cluster of mushrooms that could be used in miniature gaming for settings ranging from the Underdark of Buffenerf to the eternal warring Grim Dark, either F of Ucha or Antasy. To make the mushrooms, I utilize some basic materials and tools that any of you can get your hands on, as well as various biological specimens I have previously found and dried out in anticipation of their use. I am creating approximately in a 28mm or 1/56th scale with the intention of adding this to the other 40k orc terrain I have previously built. Note that if my voice changes during the video, I'm putting on an accent, which is to say that any and all accents are, to me, fun, and I like to try and impersonate them. The puns are also mandatory, I am to inform you. I would like to apologise in advance for some of the poor quality of the footage. I got a potato phone, didn't I? In future, I would like to try and upgrade my equipment to less starch-based tech. If you don't understand any of what I've just said, that's fine. That's probably just my accent. Let's lay such concerns aside for now and get cracking on a one-day build. Join me as I start to thriftily stick stuff together. So it all started with sunflower seeds. I garden, you see, as well as crafting and other creative endeavours. This means my scrap-bashing eagle eyes see opportunity both in and out of doors. This summer I grew some huge sunflower heads and hung them up to dry as in previous years. However, this autumn when processing them, I had a good idea. Mushrooms, mate. Unfortunately, only one of the 3 heads I'd tried to dry out survived without some actual bloomin' fungi moving in. Getting the one good one into the crafting table, I started by combining it with some thick gauge wire and the lid from a coffee can and, of course, some glue. First, I glued the wire into the stalk of the mushroom before attaching it to the coffee can lid with a lot more glue. Here is a technique for those of you who also have Teflon hands. Especially on hot days, hot glue can take a while to set hard, and this can leave your piece flopping about and eventually setting in a way you might not want. So, give it a few seconds to reduce the temperature a little bit, and then squash your thumb into it. Yes, it will be hot, so be careful. Now if you immediately pull your thumb away, you will create an abundance of stringy bits. But if you take the heat literally, in the glue it will set much faster because you will draw the heat out of it into your thumb. So roll your thumb side to side and the glue will prefer to stick to itself rather than your skin. So you can not only mold the glue in this way, which is very useful, but you also save yourself time. Next, after reloading my trusty hot sticker, I proceeded to build up the roots of my mushroom. Should mushrooms have roots, I hear you cry? Well, I'll defer to Mr. Ross to answer this one, and, I quote, "You can do anything you want to. This is your world." And this happy little mushroom loves spreading its roots. We must of course bear in mind that this is in 28mm scale, so you know, mushrooms as tall as your house, well, they can have as many roots as they like. Setting the well-rooted mushroom aside to cool completely, I grabbed the additional planty bits I had to use. To start with, there are some alder pine cones. Alder is in the birch family, and it can be found in many parts of the world. I have in the past used these as full pine trees in a 6mm scale. Next is the pre-flower bud from a magnolia tree. If you pick them at just the right time, before they start to open into a flower, they dry out very well into a form that's pleasingly already shaped like a fantasy mushroom. I also used the post-flower seed pod from the same tree, but for some reason I didn't showcase it here on video. And lastly, there is the poppy seed pod. These have some awesome texture and shape, however some of the frilly bits around the top edge can be quite brittle, so I'll have to do something to strengthen those. Now that the mushroom is solid, it's time to work on the texture of the top with 2 different types of foam. First I will use this white foam packaging from a tablet case to build up the shape that I want, cut a circle and glue it in place. Then, using this other black foam with a pleasing texture on one side, I cap the mushy by making a spiral of hot glue and attaching the whole sheet of foam. You can see from this close-up exactly why I wanted the texture for the cap of the mushroom. All of the little divots will lend themselves very well to paint and dry brushing. Cutting away the excess, I leave enough to fold a fungi frill right over the edges. Then it's back in with the hot glue to shape the edges in a more organic looking form. Round and round, pinching in the foam to mimic wild field mushrooms I remember picking in the past years. Next, it's back in with the scissors to roughen up the edges and make them look less like a hard cut. More glue to seal the deal, and that is the main mushroom, good to go. Now it's time for a quick spray undercoat before I start sticking on the other bits that might get in the way of decent coverage under the gills of the main mushroom. I would like to say that this episode is sponsored by Kiwi Ingenuity, plastic bag glove to stop unwanted black hand, and a phone in breast pocket to do the recording. Now it's time to put together the poppy heads and some toothpicks to make an interesting looking planty fungi thing. This will also strengthen the brittle bits around the top that I mentioned earlier. Each poppy head has 12 holes and I have 3 heads, so that means I need to cut at least lots of toothpicks to have enough. And to help out, here are some I prepared earlier. Now it's time for the gluing to commence, or rather to continue. This project is really eating up my stash of glue sticks at quite a hungry rate, but still, on we go. Once each bit of pick is in place, I experiment with wrapping stringy bits of glue around them, some kind of alien spider web, or snot from a sneezing Xenos. Perhaps best not to find out, eh? And with a bit of movie magic, all 3 are done. Although I'm not sure how strong these glue strings will be once the painting begins. Next, everything needs a quick coat of UBU, that's ubiquitous black undercoat. I make mine with old Matty Mate mod to the podge, mixed with a liberal amount of printer ink. Look for the printers with names like Eco Tanks. Their ink comes in small bottles rather than cartridges. Very good value for lots of ink in either black, yellow, cyan or magenta. Now it's time to stick the undercoated mushroom friends in their place, after first adding a little bit more detail to the roots. Here is the post-flower magnolia seed pod or cone going into place. These things are much more top-heavy than the pre-flower pod, so plenty of glue is needed. I make sure it has good contact all the way up the trunk, and then add what I hope will be some interesting hanging roots. Getting towards the end of the project now, it's time for some putty, special putty that is, mixed with a little PVA glue and some Aotearoa sand. You will have to source your own more local supply of sand, but anything that will add a little coarse texture is viable. And then to apply the putty, I will proceed with a highly skilled tool that my species has been utilizing for all of our millennia. And then I find, oops, I've put too much putty on and hit some of the roots, which that led me to trying to dig some back out with a toothpick. But well, that wasn't working, so I had to upgrade to the back of a teaspoon. Taking the fairy mushrooms over to my local gnome sandpit, I used the tacky nature of the putty to push a lot more sand onto the base. The theme of my Orky terrain is a yellow desert. You can of course choose any biome you like when considering your terrain bases. Remember, Mr. Bob, this is your world, he said, and I agree. And here we are with just one more step to go. A spray undercoat in black and a zenithal highlight in white, and I'm calling this one-day challenge complete. And as a bonus, I also made this other solo spiky boy with the poppy head I didn't have space for on the main piece, plus some of the offcuts of toothpicks that could be yet more plants or even crystal clusters. We shall have to see when I get to painting, which will come later. I will make a short video in the future showcasing the final result once that has happened. That just brings me enough time to say thank you for watching and happy crafting.